I hadn't spoken to my parents since they kicked me out years ago, so seeing them at the reading of the will was a massive shock. They strolled in like they owned the place, clearly there to grab my grandfather's $3.5 million estate. My hands were shaking under the table as they put on a fake act of mourning. They honestly thought the money was theirs for the taking, but the room went dead silent when the attorney paused and looked up from the papers. He mentioned a hidden camera my grandfather had installed, and suddenly my parents didn't look so confident anymore. The conference room smelled strongly of lemon polish and old paper. Ryan hesitated in the doorway for a second before he stepped onto the plush carpet. He looked toward the heavy mahogany table that dominated the center of the room. His parents were already there, seated side by side like a united front. They did not look up when the heavy door clicked shut behind him. Their presence filled the room with a tension that made it very difficult to breathe. Ryan straightened his jacket and walked past the empty chairs near the door. He felt their eyes finally shift toward him, cold and unwelcoming. Without saying a word, he pulled out the leather chair directly opposite them. The distance across the table felt like a canyon, yet it was not far enough. He placed his hands on the smooth wood and met their gaze. He refused to let them see how much their presence actually rattled him. The side door opened briskly, breaking the silent standoff between the family members. Mr. Henderson walked in with a purposeful stride, his gray suit perfectly pressed. He carried a beige legal folder that looked packed with important documents. He nodded briefly to everyone present but kept his expression completely neutral. The attorney set the thick file down on the desk with a heavy thud. That sound signaled that the official proceedings were finally about to begin. Mr. Henderson sat down and began sorting through the stack of papers in front of him. Ryan reached for the crystal pitcher in the center of the table. His throat felt dry and he needed something to do with his hands. He filled a glass with ice water and took a slow sip. The condensation on the glass felt cold against his fingertips. He watched the lawyer work, anxious for the reading to actually start. The rustling of papers seemed to annoy Ryan's mother. She leaned in close to his father and whispered something into his ear. His father gave a curt nod but kept his eyes fixed on the lawyer. She sighed dramatically and turned her head toward the large window on her left. She stared out at the city skyline, acting as if she had better places to be. It was a gesture Ryan knew well from his childhood. The attorney finally stopped shuffling the documents and folded his hands on the desk. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat loudly to ensure he had everyone's full attention. He picked up the top document and began to read in a monotone voice. The legal jargon was dense, covering the initial terms of the last will and testament. Ryan leaned forward slightly to catch every word. This was the moment that would decide the fate of the estate. The list of assets was far more extensive than Ryan had expected. Mr. Henderson described the family estate, detailing the acreage and the main house. He moved on to the various savings accounts and scattered investments his grandfather had held. Ryan had known his grandfather was comfortable, but the scope was surprising. He kept his face neutral as the lawyer listed item after item. It was clear that the estate was significant. The detailed list of properties seemed to bore Ryan's father. He suddenly spoke up, cutting Mr. Henderson off mid-sentence. He demanded to know the total bottom line in plain numbers right now. The interruption was rude, but his greed was plainly visible. He leaned over the table, his eyes wide with anticipation. He clearly did not care about the specific items, only the cash value. Mr. Henderson stopped reading and slowly lowered the paper to the desk. He looked over his spectacles at the impatient man across from him. After a brief pause, he confirmed that the total evaluation exceeded $3 million. The room seemed to shrink as the number hung in the air. It was a life-changing amount of money for anyone. Ryan saw the lawyer gauge their reactions carefully before he picked up the paper again. The confirmation of the money caused an immediate shift in his parents' demeanor. They exchanged a quick, greedy look that made Ryan's stomach turn. His mother offered a tight smile to his father, and he smirked back. They clearly believed they had already won the lottery. Their arrogance was palpable as they sat up straighter in their chairs. Ryan gripped his water glass tighter, disgusted by their obvious excitement over a death. Mr. Henderson shifted the topic from the assets to the conditions of the will. He asked the group directly about their relationship with the deceased in the past year. He wanted to know who had been present during the grandfather's declining health. The question hung heavy in the air, demanding an honest answer. Ryan stayed silent, waiting to see what his parents would say. The lawyer looked from one face to the other, pen poised. His mother spoke up first with a voice full of feigned sorrow. She told the lawyer that they had been there for the old man constantly. She described imaginary weekends spent cooking hearty meals and scrubbing the floors. She claimed they were his primary caretakers until the very end. It was a polished performance designed to secure their claim. Ryan felt the blood rush to his face as he listened to her blatant lies. The audacity of her statement was too much for Ryan to handle sitting down. He shot up from his chair and slammed his open palm against the hard wood. The sharp noise made everyone in the room jump. He looked directly at his mother and told her to stop lying. He knew for a fact they hadn't visited in over 5 years. His anger boiled over as he exposed their hypocrisy to the room. His parents did not back down despite his outburst. They doubled down on their fabrication, insisting they were the only ones who cared. Ryan watched in disbelief as they spun a tale of devotion and sacrifice. They claimed they lovingly cared for Grandpa during his final months to justify their claim. They painted Ryan as the absent son while they were the heroes. It was a calculated move to secure the money at any cost. The argument was escalating quickly, but the lawyer did not seem flustered. Mr. Henderson raised his hand firmly to demand silence from the group. The room fell quiet, though the tension remained thick. He reached into his drawer and pulled out a small black remote. He placed it on the table in front of him with deliberate care. His calm demeanor suggested that he had anticipated this exact situation would occur. Mr. Henderson addressed the parents with a serious expression. He informed them that the late grandfather was more alert than people realized. He explained that the old man had installed a comprehensive security system months ago. Cameras covered the main living areas and the bedroom. Ryan looked at the lawyer, surprised by this new information. His parents exchanged a nervous glance as the implication of the statement began to sink in. The lawyer swiveled his chair and pointed to a large flat-screen monitor. It was mounted high on the wall behind his desk, previously unnoticed. He pressed the power button on the remote and the screen flickered to life. Static filled the display for a moment before a clear image appeared. It showed the interior of the grandfather's living room. The angle was high, capturing the entire space clearly. Realizing what was about to happen, Ryan slowly lowered himself back into his seat. The panic on his parents' faces was unmistakable now. They knew they had been caught in a lie. Ryan crossed his arms and looked at them with a smirk. He didn't need to say another word to make his point. He just waited to see exactly what the cameras had recorded. The confidence his father had shown earlier evaporated in seconds. He shifted his weight from side to side, unable to get comfortable. He reached up and loosened his tie, as if the room had suddenly become hot. His eyes were glued to the screen, filled with dread. He wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand. It was clear he was remembering exactly what had happened in that house. Mr. Henderson navigated through a digital menu on the screen. He scrolled past weeks of recordings until he found a specific date. It was the day the grandfather had passed away last month. The timestamp showed it was late in the afternoon. The lawyer highlighted the file and prepared to play it for the room. The silence was so heavy it felt like it had physical weight. Mr. Henderson pressed play and the audio filled the small conference room. The grainy video showed the parents standing over the sick old man. The lawyer played the footage, revealing the parents admitting they only wanted Grandpa dead for the inheritance. They spoke clearly about the money and how much they hated caring for him. This admission legally invalidated their claim to the millions. Ryan felt a grim satisfaction as the truth finally came out. The video continued to play, becoming even more damning. The grandfather could be heard faintly asking for water and his medicine. Ryan's parents completely ignored his pleas and continued their conversation. They stood just a few feet away, calculating their share of the payout. It was a display of cruelty that made Ryan's stomach churn. They watched the man die while they planned how to spend his money. Mr. Henderson pointed the remote and the screen went black. He turned back to the stunned couple with a stern look. He stated clearly that this video evidence changed everything regarding the will. Their actions and admissions constituted a violation that stripped them of their rights. He informed them that their claim to the estate was now void. There was absolutely nothing they could say to defend themselves. Before the parents could start screaming, the office door swung open. 2 large security guards stepped in, clearly summoned by the attorney. Ryan's father started shouting threats, but the guards grabbed him by the arms. His mother shrieked as they were forcibly guided toward the exit. They were hauled out of the building without a shred of dignity left. Ryan watched them go without feeling a single ounce of pity. Silence returned to the room once the shouting faded down the hallway. Mr. Henderson slid a new set of documents across the desk. Ryan picked up the pen and signed his name on the designated lines. The inheritance was his, but more importantly, justice had been served. He shook the lawyer's hand and walked out of the office. He was the sole heir, and he was finally free of them.